Hey everybody, it's Chad Wesley Smith here for Juggernaut Training Systems. Today we're going to be continuing our series on the scientific principles of strength training. We'll be talking about principle number 3, fatigue management. Hard training, overload training, all right? So not mechanical overload, but refer back to my Smart Training is Hard Training, the Principle of Overload video to learn more about that. So hard training is necessary to improve fitness, and fitness is basically how ready you are to lift heavy weights in the case of a powerlifter, all right? But also is going to cause fatigue to accumulate, and too much fatigue would be failure to properly recover and adapt to the training that you're doing. Too much fatigue accumulated is going to result in a performance decline. So basically meaning that you're not going to be able to lift the necessary weights to satisfy the parameters of overload training. All right, so it's all about a balance, developing as much fitness as we can, but the more fitness you develop, the more fatigue that's going to come along with that. And then if fatigue gets too high, then you're not going to be able to train hard enough, and you're going to end up in one of 3 states of fatigue management. Normal training, which is less than or equal to your MRV. So you're training hard, but not too hard. All right. Then the second category, overreaching. All right. And overreaching can be functional, all right, which is planned overreaching, or non-functional overreaching, which is going to be unplanned. We'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. All right. And third, finally, is the dreaded overtraining. All right. And overtraining is a real thing. All right. It can happen. I would say though that if you are overtraining as a powerlifter or an Olympic weightlifter, all right, you are great at trying really hard and ignoring every sign your body is giving you that you're doing too much, all right? You're just blind to pain and how terrible you're feeling, and you just have a unique ability to work through feeling terrible, all right? Also, you're really, really bad at programming, because powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting, you're really only training one quality, strength, all right? Maybe strength and power. Overtraining is a real thing. It can happen to powerlifters, it can happen to weightlifters, it can happen to anyone who trains, but I would be more cautious and more conscious of it if you are, you know, an MMA fighter, a CrossFitter, training football players, where you have a lot of different pieces of the training to manage, like sport practice, strength, you know, conditioning, and making sure that those are balanced well to avoid overtraining. And I wouldn't really worry too much about overtraining as a powerlifter, but it is a real thing and it can happen. Let's go back to overreaching. We mentioned functional and non-functional overreaching. All right, functional overreaching is going to be a very important part of the training process, of the peaking process. And when you functionally overreach, that is a conscious decision on your part to exceed your normal MRV, all right? So you're going to exceed your normal MRV by either doing, you know, more volume, so more sets than you could normally recover from, or higher intensity than you could normally recover from. So if we're looking at a normal training week, you know, you train maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, you know that with that Sunday of rest, or, you know, 1 or 2 days of rest, whatever, you're able to be recovered enough to do the next week of training. That would be training at or under your normal MRV. But if we're going to functionally overreach in that week of training, you're going to do more sets, and you would need more than just that Sunday, you know, to recover from, more than just one off day. And that's where deloads are going to come into play, deloads or light days. And as we look here at deloads and light sessions, you can see the parameters of them, how frequently they should be done. Depending on experience level of the lifter, depending upon their ability to accumulate fatigue, which is going to be determined by size, strength, gender, proximity to career peak, fiber type. The more experienced, more advanced, more fast twitch fiber lifters are going to be on the lower end of this, possibly deloading every 3 or 4 weeks, all right? And more beginner, smaller, less advanced lifters, they could be deloading every 6 to 7 weeks. But really looking at deloading every 3 to 7 weeks is going to be appropriate. That's going to be well-designed training, all right? And when these deload weeks should come is after we functionally overreach, all right? So when you have that week by design of doing more volume than you know that you can recover from in just a day or two, or doing higher intensity weights than you can recover from in just a day or two, you're going to functionally overreach, because now you know you don't have just a day or two. You have an entire week, maybe half a week, several light sessions in a row to be able to dissipate that fatigue while your fitness stays high, and you know that is fatigue management at its finest. So you want to put a deload week right after a week of functional overreaching. So the way that I design training programs, I'll train for 3 weeks, all right, increasing volume or increasing intensity, 1, 2, 3, all right. That third week is going to be a week of functional overreaching. Then we're going to take a deload, dissipate the fatigue. All right, then we're going to train 1, 2, 3, deload, 1, 2, 3, and continuing to improve our fitness cycle by cycle, but managing fatigue through the use of light sessions or deload weeks. What does a deload week look like? How hard should it be? 60 to 70% of normal overload training volume and 80 to 90% of normal overload training intensity. So an example of that would be if you're in a hypertrophy block, maybe a normal hypertrophy session for you might look like 5 sets of 8 at 70%, all right? So we're gonna cut that volume, the 5 sets of 8, 40 total reps, down to 60 to 70% of that, and the intensity, 70%, down to 80 to 90% of 70%. So a deload session might look like 5 by 5 at 60% or 3 by 8 at 60%. Cutting down the volume more significantly than the intensity, as volume is a greater accumulator of fatigue than intensity is. One of the biggest mistakes I see people making with deload weeks, assuming they are taking deload weeks, and this is a mistake that I've made myself, one and probably more commonly, is making your deload weeks too hard, all right? And I know that you're enthusiastic about your training, you want to train hard. The purpose of a deload week is to decay fatigue, and if you have too hard of deload sessions, of light sessions, or of deload weeks, you're failing to do the goal of the deload week. So make sure that you're staying within these parameters of volume and intensity reduction from normal overload training so that you're actually decaying fatigue and letting the deload week do its job. The other end of the spectrum would be not doing enough on your deload week. I've had times where I feel like I don't feel like lifting at all, and I won't do anything during the deload week. I'll just sit on my ass for 7 days, and that's not going to be a good thing either, because some light training is actually going to help reduce fatigue. It's going to promote recovery. It's going to keep you in touch with your technique, promote muscular suppleness, and you're going to come out feeling a lot better. At the end of your functional overreaching week and the beginning of your deload week, you should feel terrible, all right? These reduced weights, 60% maybe is going to feel like 80%, all right? These weights are going to feel heavy, you're going to feel run down. That's fine, that's by design, all right? That is because you are functionally overreached, that you don't feel ready to lift the weights that you need to lift, all right? But every day throughout that deload week, you're going to feel a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. So then by the end of the deload week, you're going to feel great. You're going to feel hungry to lift heavy again. So the start of the deload week, you're going to feel run down. You're not even going to want to look at weights, all right? But just go in, get the work done, and then as fatigue dissipates throughout the week, you're going to feel better and be excited the next week to get back to hard overload training. You should feel run down, and that's fine. You shouldn't even want to really train because you feel so beat up at the start of a deload week or the end of a functional overreaching week. So trust the process, know that's how you should feel. By the end of the deload week, you're going to feel hungry again. Common mistakes that I see people making in regards to fatigue management. Too much volume close to the competition. Peaking properly for competition is about balancing the fitness and fatigue relationship. All right, if you watch my video, Designing a Peaking Block, I'm going to go in depth into that topic and how it's properly going to be done. If you're doing high volume work, what could be considered general strength or hypertrophy work, 1, 2, 3 weeks out from competition, depending on your experience, size, and strength, you're not going to be able to decay that fatigue in time for you to have optimal high fitness with low fatigue on the day of competition. Second common mistake in regards to mismanaging fatigue, chronically going too heavy. So we said volume is a bigger inducer of fatigue than intensity is, all right? But high intensity is gonna induce fatigue as well. So if you're always going heavy, all right, always doing heavy singles, doubles, triples in your training, that's gonna accumulate fatigue. That's gonna beat up the joints. It's gonna be unsustainable in the long term, all right? You're also gonna miss out on the idea of phase potentiation, which we'll talk about in a later video on scientific principles of strength training. Avoiding deload weeks and light days, or the other side of the coin being taking too frequent or unearned deloads, that's gonna be a problem. Like I said, I know you guys are enthusiastic. You wanna train hard. That's good to an extent, but it can be overdone, all right? Because properly designed training will include planned deloads. It will include planned light days. If you're not including those, then your hard days probably aren't hard enough, all right? So you wanna functionally overreach and then take that planned deload. Understand that that's an important part of the training process. That doesn't mean that you're soft. It doesn't mean that you're not committed to what you do. It's all a part of the process, and being truly committed to what you do means that you're disciplined and sticking with that plan. All right. So take deloads, take light days, but it's very important that you earn them, all right? So that being the other side of the coin, if you take too frequent or unearned deloads, that's going to be a negative as well. So if you aren't functionally overreaching, if you're not intentionally exceeding your MRV, either through more sets and reps or heavy weights, then you shouldn't take a deload because you didn't earn it, all right? So make sure that you're putting that into your plan. Design functional overreaching weeks. Right? Every 2 to 6 weeks in your training, so every 3rd to 7th week in your training, you can have a planned deload week. All right, you can dissipate fatigue during that week, and then you can come back hungry, ready to lift, stronger, more well adapted for what you're trying to do. Finally, overuse of passive and active recovery modalities. The things that are going to be most important to you recovering and adapting well to the training you're doing are going to be sleep and nutrition. All right, those are very, very important. They are by far the most important things you can do. Other recovery modalities, some of them are good, all right? Some of them are kind of neutral, and some of them actually may negatively affect your training. So something that I would encourage you to avoid during the normal course of training, all right, during the 3-week regular training cycle is going to be overuse of temperature therapy, particularly cold tub, contrast shower, cryotherapy. Those are going to help you recover between sessions, all right? They're going to help you feel better to do the next session. But the way that they achieve that is by artificially removing inflammation. Inflammation is one of the most important adaptation signals to the body. It's one of the things that tells your body, hey, you've been working really hard. We need to adapt and improve and be ready for what you're going to throw at us next. When you artificially remove inflammation through the use of cold therapy, you're going to actually dampen the adaptation signal. You're going to dampen the training effect. All right, and it's going to be very minimal, but that 1% loss that week, if it keeps coming, and you're losing 0.5% of training adaptation cycle after cycle, or week after week, year after year, those are really going to add up. All right, so I'd encourage you to reserve temperature therapy like that, cold tub, contrast shower, cryotherapy, for deload weeks when the goal is to restore, to feel better. Heat therapy, all right, like sauna is something that also I think has really limited use, because if you're sitting in a sauna for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and you're sweating a ton, all right, what happens when you're sweating a ton? You're getting dehydrated, all right, and dehydration is obviously going to be an enemy of recovery. Passive recovery means that I like during the course of regular training are going to be soft tissue therapy, massage, Graston, active release, as those are actually going to introduce localized, targeted inflammation to muscles that are particularly, beat up. You're going to get active release or Graston on a muscle because something feels wrong with it. And by introducing more focused inflammation to that area, your body is going to work even harder to adapt and recover that specific area that you're using. So make sure that you guys check out the articles on jtsstrength.com by Dr. Mike Israetel and Dr. James Hoffman, all about recovery, everything you need to know about recovering, as well as their presentation on Strong 360, an overview of recovery as they go through an entire list of different popular recovery modalities. So that's the principle of fatigue management. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to learn more about these ideas, make sure you check out the book, Scientific Principles of Strength Training, by myself, Dr. Mike Israetel, and Dr. James Hoffman of Renaissance Periodization. My newest book, A Thoughtful Pursuit of Strength. Make sure that you check out the previous installments on specificity and overload, and look for the future installments of this series.